So thank you everybody for coming out. My name is David Goodspeed. I work here at the university, and it is an absolute beyond pleasure is the best way to say this, right? That we have Greg Renoff here to talk about his book Van Halen Rising. Just to give you a little bit of a backstory about how all this started, because it's kind of interesting why Van Halen, why a college campus, why Greg Renoff, and how he got here and how he made his journey, which he's going to tell you. You can tell much better than I can. But I've got a couple of my best friends that I've ever had in my life out in the audience, and so they're very familiar with my passion for Van Halen. And I have a very large collection. This is part of my guitars and all that kind of stuff. But I stumbled across Greg about a year and a half ago or so. He had a picture on Tumblr that I'd never seen, and I was intrigued. And so I just reached out to the guy and I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm writing a book." And so, as time passed, he would throw in another picture, and he did some teasing type stuff on it. And so I was enthralled with it. I've read all the Van Halen books that have ever been out there. I've always had a passion of doing something along the lines with about the band or whatever. But he finishes the book. It's obviously taken off. He'll talk about that. It's the #1 book in the heavy metal biography section in Amazon, and it's in the 2015 top 10, 25? Top 20 books now in Amazon for 2015, best of the best.
Humor and entertainment.
No.
I don't know why they have humor and entertainment, but I'm not.
Hey,
that's fine.
we'll just go with that. But so about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we brought Greg to campus and he talked with a public relations course. He talked to some kids, in public relations course, and some kids in a marketing class. And I was really intrigued because what you're going to hear tonight, I asked him to talk about, we've got students in the audience, we have fans, we have maybe some faculty, we have some staff, we got a little bit of everything. But when he spoke to the classes, he didn't talk about the band. And the fanboy in me was kind of like the old Price is Right, I was kind of disappointed. But what he said, he said some things that really inspired me as a 44-year-old person to think about things differently and how you approach things and how you do things with your life or a passion that you might have and stuff like that. So it was interesting to hear that. So whenever we came back, we heard from one of the students who said, "Hey, my boyfriend was in this class and he was talking about this speaker that came to talk about Van Halen." And so we all kind of had this aha moment. As myself, Chris Lynn, and Deborah Levy out here, that we kind of got together one day real quick and said, "Let's bring him back." It was a long journey to get Greg here from Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we are beyond thrilled to have him here. And I told him, I don't care if 3 people show up, 30 or 300, you guys are in for the treat of your life. I can guarantee you are in for the treat of your life. And for those who just came in, I'll repeat the middle part here in a second. But without further ado, he's going to tell you a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and everything else. I give it up to Mr. Greg Renoff.
Business truth is, I'll get to as I go through this, is that I probably should have written this book 20 years ago. Because I was thinking about writing a book like this 20 years ago, but I didn't. So I'll go through this and kind of talk about this, talk about where things stand in the book now, and then walk you guys through the process I did to get the book published, and sort of the things I faced along the way, and then I can hopefully get you guys to think about your own creative pursuits, whatever those are. And again, I mean, for anyone in here, is anything that you guys doing, starting a small business, and what stops people from doing those types of things, and get you guys maybe a little bit inspired. So that's my plan for tonight. So, okay, so, right, this is the book Halen Rising, and as you guys all should know by now, if you don't, well, guess what? This is what we're going to be focused on tonight. It's a band called Van Halen. And my book is about the band's early days. So the idea that I had for the book, which kind of came together in my process of writing it, wasn't something I sort of started with necessarily, as I went along, I realized this was the right way to go with the book, was to focus on the band's beginnings. So to do kind of a prequel. In other words, instead of telling the part about the band's story when they're famous and everyone knows who they are, I wanted to focus on the band's beginnings before they become famous, and then talk about how they become famous. And so when I was here last time and I talked in a couple of classes, I kind of compared it to the movie The Social Network, which I had talked about a couple of other movies, and you know, a bunch of 20-year-old, 18-year-old students in class, and nobody, they had the clickers, and they were clicking. I was like, I'm going to see this movie, I mentioned it, like, it was like 2%. So I said Social Network, I got like 30%. So how many people have seen the movie The Social Network about Facebook? Okay, good. I'm among friends here, so let's do good. All right, so if you remember that movie, kind of the way we work that movie is that about 80% of the movie, approximately, takes place before Facebook actually breaks, right? Before Facebook becomes this worldwide sensation. And so that's kind of my idea with the book, was to talk about how does the big thing happen? How does the magic happen before the breakthrough happens? And so that was, again, my thinking about to write this book. And as you guys probably already gathered, I'm really passionate about Van Halen. I've been a fan for a long time. I'll talk more about that. Dave's a fan, and there's a lot of people here who are fans as well. But the book itself, and how it all kind of come together for me, this is something that I didn't expect. I wrote this book, really in the end, I wrote it for myself. And I say that I wanted people to read it, and I wanted people to like it, and I wanted people to enjoy it, get into it, believe me, wanted to sell some books, all those good things. But in the end, it was about, I wanted to write this book because I wanted to know these answers to these questions. That was what I really felt was important to me as a fan of the band, but also as a historian. I wanted to know the answers to the questions I had. And so it all has worked out, and it's easy now to look and go, oh, look, it worked so well. You're the #1 seller in the heavy metal musician biography category. Not the #1 book at Amazon, David. I appreciate you putting that idea out there, pulling that out there in the ether. You know, if you need to send out a tweet tonight that you need to delete later after about 20 hours of being out there saying the #1 book at Amazon, that's fine. But we're not the #1 book at Amazon, #1 book in the heavy metal category. But, you know, I really did not expect that to happen. My wife's here tonight, she'll tell you that was never really a game plan. The book was going to be take off like that. But you look through, again, one of the other things that really is kind of important to me now as I look at this, and I'll talk more about this, is that, you know, most of the books that are in the category of musician biography, you look at any biography category, most of the books that do well in the market are written by the artists themselves, or they're written by a ghostwriter who has the writer's permission to write the book, right? They have a contract. And so if you look, as a Van Halen fan, I'm also a Kiss fan. I was for a long time still beating Gene Simmons at a little game here. So Gene Simmons is number 3 behind me at this point. This is in late October. Notice as well, I'm proud of this as well. Notice the pricing strategy that Gene had. God bless him. Gene, if you're watching on the live stream, I love you. I love your band. Great strategy. He cut the prices, and actually did top me for a while, and they dropped the price back. They brought the price back up. But you know, for me, that was the other thing that was important. And I'll talk about why, because this was one of the stumbling blocks when we writing this book, was that I didn't have the band on board. Okay? In other words, the band didn't authorize this book. I didn't have David Lee Roth. You know, if any animals appointing me, but I want you to write our book. You know, and did, you know, Michael Anthony hoisting the tobacco box in the air. So what that was going to happen, right? So we'll talk about that. So, you know, when I went through, again, all the things that have happened since the book has come out, I've excerpted a guitar be excerpted. In other words, a portion of this book was excerpted into Guitar World magazine. It was just surreal. And it just blew my mind. Again, it was never part of the game plan when I started writing this book. I wasn't, I'd love to say that I had this master plan where I was like, all these good things are going to happen. And as things, opportunities present themselves, I tried to make these things happen, but it was never part of the big picture. And then this happens. And so, especially for people, I think, over a certain age group, us over 40, at one time, Rolling Stone was the pop culture rock magazine, politics, rock, music, movies, whatever it was. If you appeared in Rolling Stone, it was a big deal. And it still is a big deal. I don't think it's as big of a deal because the world has changed so much in the way publications operate in the world. But to have a book reviewed in Rolling Stone magazine was surreal. Absolutely surreal. And so, all these good things have happened. And I can say to myself, well, you did a great job, Greg, on this book. But the truth of the matter is, and I want to make sure you guys understand this book probably shouldn't have happened. It probably should not have happened. And not because of all the things I'll talk about that were difficult to get a book published. There were some difficulties, serious difficulties. It's because I was scared to write it. Okay? So here I am in 2008. Okay? I had not quite started the book yet. I'd begun sort of fishing around. And again, I had wanted to write a book like this for a long time, but I just begun to start fishing around with the idea of writing a book and thinking about it. And I could give myself a million reasons why I shouldn't write this book. So let me tell you guys a little bit about myself, about where I was in 2008. I was a tenured, or an almost tenured professor at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri. It's a comprehensive liberal arts school up there in Springfield. I was tenured, and as an academic historian, and I know there's some academics in here, some professors in here, we don't typically think of ourselves as trying to target the rock bio category. We're not like, the next thing I need to put in my tenure file is that I've written a rock bio. That's really going to impress the dean. He's going to immediately promote me to the Harvard chair and make me the provost of the university. No, it's like, this guy's a problem. We need to minimize the interaction with students as much as possible. He's interested in writing books about guys who wear spandex, so let's get this guy away from the kids. So, I had never, obviously I'd never written a rock biography before. I'm a college professor. I write academic style works. It's hard for me to write a book like this. And so, I can give myself all these reasons why I should write a book. Someone else should write a book. The people I was taught should write a book, which had to have never written a damn biography. We'll go back here, these guys should write their own book, right? Who's going to want to read a book that I would write about Van Halen? Yeah, I might know a lot about Van Halen, maybe I can write pretty well, but they're going to want to know from the artist, because I can look at the category and I was going, yeah, man, the books that sell really well, and look at the category, but it's all the artists. The guy from Slipknot, the guy from Lamb of God, Sammy Hagar, God bless him, he's a great entrepreneur. Red Inspiring, Richie Davis, nothing like that, but yeah, his book, #1, it's a big bestseller, right? The artists themselves. So I could give myself all these reasons why I shouldn't write this book. And so I was scared. And again, scared. I write a book like this, and it would be a total flop. A college professor writes a book about Van Halen. Snooze fest, right? It's like, oh my God, it's going to be terrible. That's what I would tell myself. It's going to be a bad book if I write this book. So I thought it was going to fail it. That no one was going to read it. It was not going to be any good. Eventually, I got to a place, and I'll talk about how I got there, where I decided to myself, you know what, I'm going to write this book, and I'm going to stop letting my own internal dialogue, my own internal breaks to say, I might fail this, stop even doing this. I'm just going to write this, and if it fails, it fails, okay? And that'll be okay. Life will go on. But I will have done what I wanted to do, is write this book. I'm going to try not to let it fail. I'm going to do everything I can to make this big a success. But if it fails, it's going to be okay. I'll get up the next day, get dressed, and I'll go about my life, and it's not going to be a lifetime of humiliation if my Van Halen book sells 50 copies. Because I'll talk about it. I already had that experience with another book. I already had a book that sell very many copies, and guess what? Life went on just fine. So that's right. That's what I wanted to really argue to you guys tonight, is that the external barriers to getting what you want to get done in terms of any sort of project or goal you have, you want to get into a certain university. You want to do a certain graduate program. You want to build an app. You want to do an invention. You want to write a novel. All these, again, the external factors, the gatekeepers, the applications, all things, raising the money, the capital, those things are all big problems. But I would argue that in a lot of cases, right, part of the big step is kind of getting yourself out of the way. Okay, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to take this leap and do this. And that's what I had decided to do. Again, the guy in the pink shirt is going to write a book about Van Halen. Again, get really interested in rock music. I had one of those cool uncles. And what I mean by cool, I'll tell you a story. My mother's watching this probably. Sorry, Mom. I don't know if my uncle's watching it. He lived with us for a while in the late 70s. And I'd go into his room. So I was about 8 or 9 years old. And he would be, there'd be smoke in the room. He'd be smoking. What's going on? Uncle Tommy? Oh, nothing. Nothing. He's sitting there with his red eyes. And I'm like, why does Dad smoke such a big pipe when he smokes such a little pipe? So I had one of those cool uncles. It was all about. But for me, one of the things that was cool about it is he played Jimi Hendrix, and he played Allman Brothers and Cream. He played all this really cool music. It kind of got me interested in rock music, the Doors. So by the time I got to be 14 years old and I had MTV, I see this band, Van Halen, on MTV. The video John David played on a loop before we started here tonight. And I see this, and I just was enraptured by this band. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen. This is really cool. I like this. So I went out and bought a 45. So for those of you who collect vinyl, you know, the 45 was the way you kind of start to get into a band, maybe buy the 45. I don't know if I didn't have the money, or if I didn't have the money when I went to the store to buy it or something. Who knows? I only had $3 in my pocket. And so I bought the 45. It was probably about $2.25. I bought it. And I had a song Jump on it, which was the single, which was so successful on MTV and on the radio. And this other song in the back called House of Pain, which I really, really love. I was, you know, it was on. I love this band, so absolutely loved it. So I hear from, I don't know, on the radio or some people at school, I hear Van Halen's coming to New Jersey to play some concerts. And I was like, wow, I'd love to go. I hadn't seen a couple concerts already, but I really wanted to see Van Halen. And I was at that age where I probably was too young to go by myself. Probably was 14, my mother's mind, but I was still probably able to convince her, I thought. So what ended up happening, right, so the album was out, there's a kid in my class, my first period class, guy named Jim, and he knows I'm drawing Van Halen on my tracker keeper or something like that. Probably on the cover of my book, my paperback book cover. And he sees that, and he goes, oh, we didn't look at Van Halen? I'm like, yeah, I like Van Halen. So my brother got me a ticket to the concert, but I'm not really into Van Halen. I don't know, whatever he was, the Grateful Dead or New Wave, I don't remember, but he was not a Van Halen fan. His brother had gotten me a ticket. And so my eyes just got really big, and I was the world's worst negotiator. Like, he knew, he was on the hook, and it was over. It was like, it was over, right? So I was like, wow, you don't want to go? Would you sell the ticket? Oh, I don't know, maybe. And then I was kind of like, I'll pay for it, whatever I'll pay, maybe $20. And so it just kept going and going and going and going. And I paid $50 in 1984 for a concert ticket. Yeah. Now, I'm still trying to remember how this all came about. I'm pretty sure I probably had my parents were divorced. I probably had my dad take me to the bank when he came to visit us on the weekends. And I went to the bank and I had a bank book and took the money out of the bank. I probably didn't tell my mother I did that. I just went, just still had a little cross up. I had a little checking account or probably a little savings account. Probably money that God rest her soul, my dear aunt had probably given it to me to save for college stuff. And I took the $50 out. I had the $50 bill. I remember I brought the $50 bill to school, and he opened up his book, this kid, and the ticket was there. And I had a $50 bill. And it was just like, real brand new thing out of my hand. He wanted money, and I wanted the ticket, and that was it. And so I went to see Van Halen, and I told my mother that I had bought the ticket. She was not happy, but she agreed, to her credit, to let me go. She was going to drop me off and then pick me up, one of those things. So I go to this show, and here's my ticket stub. April 2nd, 1984. Sorry, I don't have a better scan. I didn't have a better scan on my hard drive. This ticket, so $15 face value. I paid $50 for it. And let's face it, if any economist in here, in retrospect, quite a good investment, I might say. Buy a koozie on the way out. So, but before the concert happens, okay, I got a little ahead of myself. My father, huge baseball fan. He just passed away, but he was someone who used to take us to a lot of baseball card shows. I don't know if there's baseball card shows that are popular these days, probably not, but he used to take us to them, and like Willie Mays would be there, Hank Aaron, and these guys, and they'd sign autographs, and there'd be all these people set up at tables for to sell baseball cards and baseball memorabilia, sports memorabilia. So we went to one. This is 3 days before the Van Halen concert happens in New Jersey, and we go. My dad and I go. get ready for this, right? This is what's going to happen when I get out of the elevator. We're going to get out of the elevator, what am I going to see? I'm going to see David Renoff, Eddie Van Halen, Alex Van Halen back there in the white hat band, very stylish, and then Michael Anthony Holmes, Jack Daniels. They're going to be so happy to see me. Great, how are you with us? Well, today you come backstage on Monday too. Why not? We're going to have a real weekend for you. So we get to go out of the elevator. As soon as we get to the doorway, the elevator, right? Hoping to see these guys. What do we see? This. I swear, this guy looked like a grizzly bear matched up with a weightlifter. He was against the wall between the doors, and he spun around and he was like, "You guys, get back in the elevator, go back down." He was cursing a whole bunch. I mean, he looked sort of like this. I remember being terrified. So we put it back, our movie. He was like, "Tell your friends never to come back up here again." So of course we knew the real story. The kids who said they had been up there, they didn't get any farther than we had gotten. And so, I tell you this story in part to just underscore the fact this is the closest I ever got to Van Halen. Now I did eventually interview Michael Anthony, the bass player of the band, who's no longer in the band. As some Van Halen fans who are going to know tonight, the bassist of this gentleman here, holding the bottle of Jack Daniels. He was in the band for a long time, played bass. He's no longer in the band, so he's the only one in the band who would talk to me for the book. And so that day, in March 1984, that was the closest I ever got to Van Halen. That was it. So one day, of course, it was a great, I was terrified, but of course I was just buzzed even more to see the band. Wow, they party with a lot of girls. Right? And I was really interested in girls. They had a lot of girls that hang out with them. So I go to this concert. This is sort of what I saw. This was the stage of the 1984 tour. And, for a kid I'd seen some concerts before, but the setups of the stage was pretty simple, usually with an open setup, maybe some amps back there, but it had this huge, monstrous stage set, so many lights, so much sound, so loud. Eddie Van Halen's guitar playing was so incredible. David Renoff seemed like to me a combination to me of like Tarzan, he's a superhero. It was just an amazing show. And it made me just a super fan. And the guy, when I was on the radio this morning, the DJ asked me right after if I was a super fan. And I said, yeah, I'm a super fan. I guess that's what you describe me on this. I'm a super fan. So that was it. It was on for me. And I just loved Van Halen. So, again, right, that's the closest I ever got to Van Halen. Years go on, and I still remain a fan. I read every interview I can get my hands on. I read every book I can get my hands on about Van Halen. And I buy all their albums. How many of you remember the Columbia Record Day Club? What an operation, I'll tell you. What an operation. That's incredible. The greatest come on in history, right? Right? 1 half price sale. Take one for half price with every one you buy at the regular club price. So, bought all the Van Halen albums. Loved Van Halen. Went to concerts in the 80s. And again, years go on, I just remain interested in reading all I can about the band. So as you guys know, life goes on, and my dreams of being partying with Van Halen are long gone in the past. And what I do is I ended up going to grad school in 1995, 1996. I graduated from Rutgers University, New Jersey. And I ended up doing a master's degree in history at the University of Mississippi. Here I am, captured in a picture. It just turned out to be that there was a photographer taking a picture one day I was walking by. I'm actually a New York Jets fan. And so I have to tell you, I'm almost certain this was the year the Jets had won one game in 1995 or 1996. And I'm so certain the look on my face is like they lost again. They were like 1-10. Because I remember this moment when the photographer was there. I'm pretty sure that's like, go get my New York Times so I could read about my beloved Jets and read how they lost. And so, life goes on. I'm a graduate student. The whole idea of me writing about rock music has sort of been kind of, forgotten or not really fully appreciated. Because again, I always, I knew I wanted to be a historian. I loved history, and I wanted to know more about Van Halen's history. But in the idea of me doing that, that isn't what professors write. So I wanted to be a professor, really badly. Wanted to be a professor. And so I ended up going to Brandeis University in Waltham, Massachusetts, to do my PhD work. Very excited, very good school. Was really happy to get there. Get back to the Northeast after I graduated from my master's program at the University of Mississippi. And I ended up finding a dissertation topic. So most of you here probably know what dissertation is, but a dissertation is like a long piece. It's like a 300-page history book, basically. So it's an analysis of a topic in history, in my case, or in English or any other topic, political science. And so I ended up writing a dissertation about traveling circuses, do this whole project about what it was like when these big shows would come to town, in the late 19th century. They set up the tents. The religious people would get all offended. The locals would get drunk. They would make a ruckus, and then they would leave and go on to the next city. We don't see any parallels here? Now, believe it or not, this didn't really dawn on me fully until after I was like into the project. I was like, oh, this is a lot like arena rock. Right? And again, right? I always, all along, wanted to write that book about Van Halen or about rock music and just didn't have the guts to do it. I had the guts to go to my advisor, one of MacArthur, right, to Jeannie Scram. She's a great lady. She's listening. Love you, Jackie. I didn't have the guts to sit down and go, hey, Jackie, here's the deal. I know you really want me to write about services, but I'm going to write about Black Sabbath. I'm going to write about Grand Funk Railroad. You know? I'm going to write about, I'm going to write about Led Zeppelin and Motley Crue. What do you think about that? That wouldn't have flown, I don't think, very far. That would have been a very short conversation, and she would have said something I know, like, oh, you do want to get a job, don't you, when you graduate? And I would have said yes, and she would have said, well, you should not do that topic. I would have said, okay, I want to get a job. So I wrote this dissertation about travel services. And you know how this goes, it's years of work, years and years of work. And finish it up, and I become a professor. Here I am. A lot of miles, a lot of years. It's been a rough last, 10 years. It's 2005. Got little twin girls now who are 3, so you can see the miles have really been wearing down on me here. But yeah, go to grad school, get a job as a professor at Drew University, and just really threw myself into the job. Never giving up. I think deep inside me, I might write a book about rock music one day. But what I did was I spent my time and energy working on trying to get the book published. Okay, so in other words, the dissertation published. So most of you probably know about academic culture. If you don't, think what happens is you do as a young professor as much as you can try to build up your scholarship. If you're a scientist, you want to publish studies. If you're an English professor, you want to publish your dissertation into a book. You want to publish something so that the university can say you're not just a good teacher, but you're a great researcher as well. And you're providing some scholarship that's going to improve the knowledge of the world. And so what I ended up doing was working on the book. Back again here to Van Halen. I don't know how that happened. Back here to this book that ended up coming out in 2008. So this was the revision of my dissertation. And I was really proud of it. I worked really, really, really hard on it. The truth of the matter is, it's easier to write a book after you've written one book. So the first one you write, it was difficult. You have to go through, revise the dissertation, improve it, proofread it, go through all the steps of the publication process, which oftentimes are there's some stumbling blocks there. You don't know the rules of the game basically about how to make this all happen. And I worked through it, got it out, got it published. And when it came out, I was relieved because there was so much work that went into it, but I also had the expectation that people were going to read it and like it. Again, I didn't think it was going to sell a ton of copies, but I thought people would read it, like it, people would be excited about it because I was excited about the topic. And I thought I had done everything right. I thought I had read it, proofread it, organized it, made it into a really good book. And actually got some very good reviews in academic journals, Journal of American History, Journal of Social History, these bigger history journals that reviewed the book and praised it. But you know what? No one really bought it. No one really read it. And it's not it's not the press's fault, believe me. The first thing I want to say is I'm not putting this on the press. I remember the press gave me a call at one point and said, I think we're finding out an NPR interview. And I just said, oh, good. That'll be an interview. That sounds great. That's what smart people do. They go to NPR and they talk about their books. That's what all the smart people do. And the guy said, I'll get back to you. I never heard anything. Now, again, I could have followed up. We'll talk all about it, right? That's on me ultimately. But book came out, landed on a thud. Very, very few people read it. In fact, the hardcover edition of the book, I believe, is still not sold out as original 300 printing. 300 copies. Okay? And so, in the end, you kind of look at this as an academic and you say, well, I can shake this off. Because the bigger deal here is its utility for tenure. In other words, the book came out, it's well reviewed, it's been peer reviewed, the journals liked it, people in the field, the few people in the field who are interested in this, like it. So all good. But there was something I realized, I put all this work into it, and there's no one really it's like I get one email a month about it. Maybe from a grad student who wants something, which is fine, but it's just sort of, done and it's over. And you're like, on to the next thing. I was like, well, okay. And so I learned a couple of really, really important lessons there. Okay? I don't care what your goal for yourself is, whatever you want to do. If you want to build an app, you can't count on other people to do the hustling for you. You've got to hustle for yourself. I learned that again. That's where I should have been on the phone. I should have been emailing people. I should have been going, hey, I've read this book. I want to talk to you about this book. I should have been putting myself out there more. But I had this false idea in my head. I think a lot of academics, let's just say, I'll speak myself. I had the idea. That's sort of like, if you do something good, and it's a good book, then somehow there's going to be this light that's going to send out of the heavens, it's going to come down and say, you're a genius. Congratulations, you joined the club here. Like there's like a room. You're backstage with Van Halen, it's a bunch of professors that are eating wine and cheese, and it's very awkward conversations. They're wearing cheese. That's what it's like. So that's what I thought was going to happen, and that didn't happen. So, I realized that if I wrote anything again, whatever it was, I was going to try to do a better job of engaging. Again, you go to more conferences as an academic, you try to do more things to get more people engaged. And I thought I had done what I needed to do, but clearly I had not done anywhere near enough. All right, so soon after this book came out, I had tenure, I had a little bit of reading room, I had a sabbatical actually, which was nice. The university was happy to have me take a sabbatical, take some time off. They were like, yeah, take a year off, it's fine, okay, yeah, whatever, just go, it's fine. So, back to this. And I thought to myself, okay, right, I had tenure, I'll write another academic book, sure, another book that's meant to be speaking to other scholars primarily. But I thought maybe I'll do a little bit of research on Van Halen, some of the stuff I want to research. So I had some reading room. And I started doing a few interviews, and I talked to a few people who had been involved with helping Van Halen before Van Halen became famous. So, as much as I would like to have called up David Roth and got him on the phone and started talking to him about how I wanted to write a book about Van Halen, that's not how it was going to go down. So I talked to a gentleman in particular who owned a bar in Van Nuys, California, in the middle of the 70s, and at this bar, he was the man who pioneered the white t-shirt contest in a bar environment. Turns out that the band that was in the bar working, or one of the bands that was working regularly, was working at the bar the night the bar was busted for obscenity, was Van Halen. And he was telling me this whole story, and I was like, wow. I said, I remember reading a little bit about this along the way, and I was really interested. And I interviewed him, he gave me a few other people to interview. God bless me, I interviewed a couple of the women who participated in the contest, and one of them we passed in a very nice lady, she's a great lady. And so, along the way, I started interviewing more people, and I thought, there's a story here that's actually really, to me, interesting as a fan, but I thought interesting about how bands have to hustle to make it. And so, again, I still have some academic projects I want to work on, some of their articles I want to try to write that are going to be published in academic journals, but I do these interviews, and I don't really know what I'm going to do with them, but I'm starting to do this, and I'm getting more and more interested in trying to write this book about, or do some research towards some sort of publication on Van Halen. Eventually, what ends up happening is I stumble forward over the next 4 or 5 months, and I do about maybe 40 or so interviews, and I have some good material, I've done some newspaper research, magazine research, I have some good stuff, and I put together a book proposal. I figured, okay, I can write a short book on Van Halen, and I decided that I'm going to put together this proposal. But what I did was I wasn't willing to really commit fully to what I should have committed all along to writing a rock biography. Because again, I was afraid that if I wrote a rock biography as a college professor, people would laugh. People would say, oh, my colleagues would be like, oh, I guess Greg just wants to torpedo his whole career. What a shame. I had so much promise as a historian, and now he's doing this thing on David Roth and the rest of Van Halen. So I wrote a book proposal in 2010. And so a book proposal is a business plan to try to get a book published. And I sent it to a few literary agents in the hope that they would take the book, and then I was hoping to get it to a trade press, and maybe I thought maybe they would be able to hook me up with an academic press. I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to do. That's part of the problem. I wasn't exactly clear about my plan. And rightly so, they were back and said, Greg, we can't sell this. And that was a pretty disappointing piece of news to hear, because I thought to myself, well, what did I do wrong? Oh, I know what I did wrong. I wasn't willing to really go all in and say, look, if I write this book and it flops, or I write this book and people laugh, I write this book and it doesn't turn out to be the way I want it to turn out to, it's okay. Okay, And so, okay, so here we are. Okay, now I've tried to write a book proposal on this band Van Halen, and I failed at that. Here I am, still happy though, still teaching. This is me in my natural environment. And so, again, this is 2008 or so, no, I guess this is 2005. I think it's actually, that's mislabeled, this is actually more like 2008. And so, I just took that rejection, I kind of licked my wounds, and I said, you know what, I'm going forward. I'm going to do it. I realized I had tenure, which was big, obviously a big luxury. It's easy for me to say all this stuff. I don't know that I had tenure. But I thought to myself, I will write, continue to write things that are more academically driven, but I'm going to write this book on Van Halen. I'm just going to, if I can self-publish it, I'll self-publish it. You know, I put it on Kindle, you do it in any sort of way, but I said, no matter, at the end, I thought to myself, I've got to write this book. I remember having a conversation with my wife in the kitchen, and it's very deep and loving conversation I had about my interesting work habits that around this book of Van Halen. I basically laid it out and said, I've got to write this book. I have to do it. And she understood. I had to write it. It had to happen. One way or the other, it had to come out. And so, I'm digging into newspapers, magazine articles, interviewing more people, and I got pretty good at networking. And especially into the band's hometown of Pasadena, lots of kids there had hired Van Halen to play backyard parties. People had gone to high school with any announced Van Halen. These great stories I'm hearing the stories I always want to know about Van Halen. Guys were telling me, oh yeah, I used to go over to Eddie's house. But you guys understand, maybe not everyone here knows, Eddie Van Halen is like the man, the guitar player. He's like the Jimi Hendrix, he's from Picasso with electric guitar. And they're like, yeah, we used to go over to Eddie's house and we would watch him play on his bed. His mom would bring us beers and we would watch him play guitar. And when he was a teenager, right, 18 years old, your jaw drops, and you start talking to these people. And this is the stuff I always wanted to know as a fan. And as a historian, I'm thinking, this is how Van Halen became Van Halen. And that's where it finally hit me. I said, look, this book is about how did we get to a situation where this band could be such a success right out of the gate in 1978. It didn't happen in 1978. In other words, right, when George Clooney debuts on the screen and he has his first big hit movie, we know that George Clooney didn't start practicing acting 5 minutes before he went on the screen. Years of working, probably doing movies he didn't want to do, parts he didn't want to take, to work on his craft to became great. And I realized that's what this book's going to be about. I'm going to look at the years where the guys grinded it out for years and years and years in LA, in these terrible places again. Biker bars. They're playing my t-shirt on this, they're playing in front of Hell's Angels. Guys would have wrapped a chain around the drummer's neck and threatened to kill him if he didn't play Foghat again. I mean, that type of place. Really, these are not nice places they're playing, and they're playing for very little money. And so while the band is really following, the band is becoming, in the early 70s, becoming more successful on a local level, they're not getting really anywhere very fast. That's part of the other thing that ended up happening when I wrote this book. I took a tremendous amount of inspiration from the band's story. So here, I promised my friend here was going to talk about Van Halen. Talk about Van Halen a little bit more. So, understand, right, Van Halen forms in 1973. They form with David Lee Roth partnering up the Van Halen brothers and forming this band called Van Halen. At the time, David Lee Roth was kind of a local guy who aspired to be a rock star. Not kind of, he aspired to be a rock star, even though no one wanted him to be a rock star. He had a big mouth, he liked to dance, he wasn't a great singer, but he seemed like the right guy at the right time for the Van Halen brothers, who had a guy who was a lead singer named Eddie Van Halen, who sang and played guitar, who was super shy, didn't like to sing, so they joined up with Roth. Okay? They partnered together. These guys worked for 5 years before they become famous. I'm talking playing 24 nights out of 25, 5:45s. That's a phrase that's probably long gone out of all our vocabularies. Anyone know what 5:45 meant? 5 45-minute sets of music a night. Okay? So you're in here, you're playing for 5 hours, basically 15-minute breaks every hour. All those songs. Okay? Now you know 200, 150, 200 songs. Because people are going to stumble up the stage and say, hey, can you play that new Doobie Brothers song for us? And you want to play the song. You want to get invited back to the band, so you better know the Doobie Brothers song. You better play it. And you play the Doobie Brothers song. And you do this for very little money. Night after night, you're loading up the van. The old Eddie Van Halen used to drive a Scooby-Doo van. With literally like different colored doors, like one for a junkyard, back wheels on the drove like Scooby-Doo for an online van. Okay, these guys did this for years, and I really took a lot of inspiration from this. These guys had every reason to be like, this isn't working. We're never going to get anywhere. And in fact, the more I found out that record company executives And inevitably what ended up happening before they got signed by Ted Temple in 1977? They left. They were like, no, we're not interested. We don't like the singer. We don't think the guitar player is controlled enough. He's too wild when he plays. So they had all these bad things happen along the way. So I took a tremendous amount of inspiration from this slogging way that these guys do over the years and years and years. So as I mentioned, right, I'm deciding I'm going to publish this book one way or the other. But again, this is the obstacle here. This is the guy who's got to sell a book. Do I need to review? I can't help myself. It's my college professor. Let me review again with you guys. This rocks. This is rock. This is who should be writing the book, right? Dave's written a book. Dr. Dave, Renoff. And then there's me. The guy in the white shirt with the tie standing in front of the Dell computer with the dust on. He's going to write the Van Halen biography. From a university in Springfield, Missouri that nobody on the coast has ever heard of. Okay? That's the truth. So, here's what I want to talk about the obstacles that are there. So I say, okay, you got to overcome the internal obstacles. So eventually, I was able to sort of face those off. Those demons come up. They come up and they say, hey, you should quit. You should do this. But I was going to write this book. And so, here's the thing. I don't have an agent, right? To write a book, a trade book, where I try to get an agent, a literary agent, so that's someone who's going to represent you in the marketplace. Basically go out and say, I have this guy or this gal who's written this book proposal, has a book idea, and I think it's really good. You should buy it. Harper & Row, Simon & Schuster, buy the book. So I don't have an agent. My sales record, there's something called book scan. Whew, you can see how ugly they can get a book scan. It's like a flat line. You know, I'll never forget. At one point, I remember there was this, I looked, and I actually even look and see your book sales, and there was a spike in Springfield, Missouri. I was like, what? So what's Springfield? What happened? I realized that there had been a little book group that I had gone with these nice older ladies who wanted me to come talk about books. So they all bought the book. There were like 6 books. There was a little spike in the line. And that was me driving that sale personally. And I could physically appear in this lady's porch and drink tea with these nice ladies and talk about the book. It was a great time. That's what drove the sales of the book. So I've got no sales record. Again, I'm a college professor. Guys who take shirts don't write rock bios. They just don't. And so that's where it's at. And so I just kept going along and trying to pile up the interviews. I did more and more and more interviews. And I got to interview some pretty critical people to the band's history. And again, I never got to interview David Renoff. Never got to interview Eddie Van Halen. But I got to interview Ted Templeman, who some of you may know produced all the Van Halen records, the first 6 Van Halen records. He also produced Carly Simon, the Doobie Brothers. I mean, how many times have you listened to a classic rock station you're trying to grow a day? All right? That's Ted Templeman. So, guys like Ted Templeman, some of the other guys who are working on engineering the record, making the record happen. They're former managers. Again, former bass player of Van Halen. So I get to talk to some guys who were pretty instrumental to the band's success. Why'd you put Renoff controls in mine?
Well, you know, I'm just saying.
This is the David Renoff picture comes up in Renoff controls. I saw that. Not an accident.
We're safe, Rob.
So, you know, as I was working along here, I was able to accumulate quite a number of key people to help me participate in the project. Eventually, I get to the point where I'm going to write this next book proposal. Let me see if I can show you guys. I'm going to rewrite it. With it, Dave, you might have to focus it. Back to left. Okay. Right? Here's my interviews piled up. But, I write this book proposal. Okay? And then it's a marketing plan. And this is where I want to emphasize again, this is a real obstacle. Because if you don't write a good book proposal, if you don't have a good business plan, I don't care what it is, whatever you're working on, right? If you guys want someone to invest in your company, or you want to create something that's you're going to people invest in, you got to have a plan. Who people watch Shark Tank? Yeah, Shark Tank. I'm a fan of Profit. I don't watch it very much anymore, but at one point in my life, I watched a lot of Profit on CNBC. Really like that show. Right? These individuals who have money or want to invest in you, or again, these gatekeepers like literary agents and publishers, they're going to ask you hard questions. You don't get to open and eye your way through the answers. And so this book proposal is meant to be, here's all the answers that you want to know about the book. How are you going to sell it? Who's going to buy it? Why would anyone care? And my wife will tell you, we probably did 30 drafts my agent's doing talking, and he's forwarding me the emails. And, you know, one of the presses in particular, which will remain nameless, was like, "This looks really great. What do you think about getting Dave to help write it?" Now, I understand the impulse there, because again, you look at the bestseller categories, the autobiography category, or again, books about anyone who's famous, almost always, the books that do well, really well particularly, are going to be books that are written by the actress, the actor, the musician, whoever it is themselves. So I understand the impulse. And I got to a little conversation with this individual, and I tried to explain to this person that, well, you know what, probably not going to be able to get a date to go off with a book with me. And she was like, well, that's too bad, basically. And so they passed. And I started getting this sense that basically, I figured eventually the book proposal will get sold. Someone, you know, eventually you sort of have your aspirations for where you want to be, and it sort of goes through the great fear. Eventually someone will buy in. But a lot of months, I think something like 10 months. And again, a lot of this is just people holding on to the proposal, just sits on their desk and they don't want to look at it. You know, people coming back to, yeah, you know, the books that really do well in the category, the books written by the artists themselves, and maybe kids that are actually going to present themselves really well. Can you get any help? You know, maybe Eddie will do this book with Greg. You know, that's a good plan, it can work. But notice books like this, right? Larry Sloman, I don't know very much about Larry Sloman, but I guarantee you Larry Sloman has sold a lot of books. The guy who wrote with Anthony Kiedis, he's got a track record of selling books. Eddie Van Halen is not going to sell books. In his mind, he hires this guy. Right? They send Eddie the picture. This guy very wants to write the book with you. Right? In his pink shirt. What has he written? No, he's written a circus book. Nobody liked it. Nobody read it. Yeah, and he's going to go, oh yeah, he's my man. Send him up to my house, he can move in for a month in my pool house and live there, we'll do the book together. Yeah, no. Okay? So that wasn't in the cards. So it was frustrating. I'm not going to lie, it was frustrating to hear this over and over again from publishers, basically in so many ways saying, oh, there's been Halen books out there, because they're thinking, he's the college professor, he has sold books. They're not saying that, that's what they're thinking. Okay, so move down the line here, and an independent Canadian press, which has done a fantastic job with the book, and I actually read some of the books that they published books about wrestling. This is called entertainment culture writing, so they do a lot of literary books, they do some books about pro wrestling, believe it or not, a lot of books about music, written some books about, just one that came out of the about Neil Young. So it's a Canadian independent press called ECW Press, makes a deal for the book. And I'm like, okay, all right, we're here. We're here. We've gotten, at least I'm going to have a trade book. Now, understand, right, the money, whatever money I had imagined in my mind, I had no idea what the money was going to be. But the money, you know, you understand, as we went through the, you know, there's no bidding against it, right? It's like, we'll pay you X for it. I'm not supposed to say, no, I want more money. They would say, go away. Go publish it yourself. Go make a PDF and have fun trying to market it. So the book deal is signed. And I go forward, I'm going to write this book. And so here again, right, this is what I'm going to try to count on now, right? That I have worked so hard on this that I figure I'm going to deliver something that even if it doesn't sell a lot of books, I'm hoping people like David Goodspeed, who puts it down tonight, who's the Uber fan, I'm hoping the Uber Van Halen fans, the people like me, will dig the book. And some people will read it, and that'll be okay. I'm okay with that, right? Because I'm going to go on. My life as a college professor, all going to continue along its way, and it's all going to be good. But I had that thinking in the back of my mind again. It really bothered me a tremendous amount that my book had not done well, my first book. And I remember what I had done, which I had done nothing basically in marketing. Nothing. So I'm like, I'm not making that mistake again. I don't know what's going to happen with this book, but I'm going to start marketing it. And so I put up a Tumblr, and I just started sharing pictures. I spent time in bed, trolling through the internet, looking for pictures of Van Halen. I had a very exciting way to spend our night together, my wife and I. Well, I'm looking for these rare pictures of Van Halen to put up on this Tumblr. And I started talking about this book that's going to come out. And, you know, I'm not trying to like go all over the internet and brag about how great it's going to be, but I'm just telling people, hey, I write this book. They're like, oh, wow, what are you going to write about? It's in the backyard parties. The parties where 2,000 people would come see Van Halen play in the backyard. When no one outside of Los Angeles would do the band was. 2,000 kids. Helicopter would come, shine spotlight out of the band. And David would go off and keep singing and dancing and performing. The riot used to come right wanted to get people excited. And David emailed me. I don't remember when David emailed me, but at some point David reached out to me and was like, hey man, what are you doing? Like, what's this Van Halen Rising thing? I said, I've got this book. It's going to come out. It's going to come out next year. So this is 2014. And so, you know, people like David and other Van Halen fans started getting interested and getting engaged. And I just kept at it every day. Drip, drip, drip. Another picture, another little post. I would put up little teaser things about the book and what was going to happen. I did a few podcast interviews. I did one where I really sort of laid out the basic ideas I was going to talk about in the book. And it got shared quite a bit. And that, again, that was not what I necessarily expected. But people really seemed to be very, very interested in this. And because I was just a fan who wanted to write this book, people would ask me questions about, oh, is it true that Gene Simmons, this is before the book, that Gene Simmons tried to help Van Halen? I say, yeah, you know, I've got the whole story in the book. I really do. I've got it down. I mean, I've got it nailed down. People are like, wow, that's going to be cool. So people got excited about this book before it came out. And so, again, in the back of my mind, in the front of my mind now, I know, right? You have to be able to put yourself out there and say, look, I'm making this book. You can't sort of hide, right? Because part of me wants to be like, well, if it fails, I'd rather fail in a little small way. You know, it kind of comes out. Like the circus book, it failed in a small way. You understand? No, because I didn't really tell anybody about it. So it came and went, and nothing happened. And so I kept reminding myself that that's what's going to happen if you don't promote. And I just really tried to promote it the best I could. In October of 2014, I delivered the manuscript to the press. And so then we're still waiting, right? And so I'm still kind of like laying out my ideas about the book where I can online, telling people about it, really trying not to be shy about it. One of the things I did, which I would really recommend to anyone who wants to start a project like mine or something similar, is I built a website. Well, not personally, but had some guys I know build a website. But I set up an email list, and I would get people to subscribe to the email list. This actually became very, very important in the final push for the book when it comes out. And so I would, on this email list, start giving people leftovers from the book. So basically what I decided to do was, look, I had more material than I could ever fit in the book. There are some people, God bless them, uber fans of Van Halen, who want to know why I didn't shove everything into the book. They think of a book as like as much stuff as you can shove between the covers. That's a good book, man. 500 pages about Van Halen. I had to tell them, well, not everything fit in the story. You can't just keep stuffing stuff in there just because you want to. So the stuff I had left over, I just gave it away. I don't know if anyone subscribed to my email list. Stories about Van Halen brothers and David Lee Roth posing as punk rockers on the Sunset Strip in 1977. I didn't bring that picture along. Hilarious story. They dressed up like punk rockers. They fooled a photographer from France into thinking that they were a new punk band from Scotland called the Enemas. And this fanzine from Los Angeles called Slash, okay, a very famous punk fanzine, they put Van Halen on the back cover. These guys are dressed like punk rockers in rag clothes. I mean, hilarious, right? I couldn't fit it in the book. I just gave this stuff away to people. People would forward the emails around and get excited. So, book comes out. What I did when I launched the book, and this I got to say, you know, you get people excited and things happen. So I had two friends of mine, one in Hawaii, Janice, and one in Pasadena, California, my friend Roger. Okay, I interviewed them both for the book. I had interviewed lots of their mutual friends because they grew up in Los Angeles and had been around when Van Halen was rising to the top in Los Angeles. And they say, let's have a party. And I remember when they first bring it up to me, I'm thinking like, what, you mean like let's go to Chili's and do like some like queso and stuff? Like, I'm like, that sounds like a really good idea. I'll be hungry. Because I was going to do a book event at a bookstore in Pasadena. I was like, that sounds great. Let's have a party. They're like, no, let's have a party with a band. It's like, okay. Let's have a party with bands, and we'll hire a Van Halen tribute band. We can't get Van Halen to play, but we'll get Van Halen to play, who, by the way, did a fantastic job. Highly recommended. I hope they come to Oklahoma. They were great. They kicked ass. Okay, so I had this party. This thing, if Janice and Roger are listening, it was a struggle. It was a struggle to put together. I'm in Tulsa. Roger's in Pasadena. Janice is in Hawaii. We're trying to put this together. We're trying to get musicians to play because we have the tribute band and we have local guys who kind of came up on the same scene with Van Halen who are going to play too in this bar in Los Angeles that was called the Handlebar, in Pasadena, but Van Halen played here. So it was really cool. It was a bar that Van Halen had played when they were a bar band. So this thing comes together, and it was great. If you guys checked out the Van Halen news desk, all these people came. The former bassist of Van Halen, the guy who was in the band in the early 70s before Van Halen really has the final lineup formed, shows up, a guy named Mark Stone. He played bass with the tribute band. It was great. was great. And then the night before, what I did was I had a book signing at a bookstore called Romans Books in Pasadena. It's an old institution bookstore there. And I was able to get a special guest to come out. This guy right here. Anyone know who that is? Ted Templeman, the guy who produced all the Van Halen records. And so I had gotten to know Ted. He had been really helpful to me with the book and really believed in what I was doing and was cool enough to come out and sign books. And so, I mean, look at the picture there, right? Me, I'm thinking to myself, how did this happen? I know, I changed shirts. I got the same shirt on tonight. I figured it was my lucky shirt. Did you see that? Same watch, same shirt, same everything. I wanted to make sure. I don't know, maybe it's the clothes. I don't want to. So they said the man or the clothes, maybe it's the clothes. We'll stick with the same outfit. And, you know, how do I get from, right, the guy here in the pink shirt to this guy? You know, and I'm just telling you, I just kept going forward. When I got things that had bad news, Eddie Van Halen won't talk to me. Hurt me. I was hurt. I mean, right? You're like, come on. I wrote this really nice email, and I understand why. It's okay. But I wrote this really nice email to Eddie, and I get this email back from his publicist saying, no, thank you, very quickly. David Lee Roth blows me off. You know, I've done all this work, really worked hard on this book, trying to basically pay tribute to these guys. I'm such a super fan. And, you know, but in the end, it was just, got the obstacle in your way, you just got to go around it or go through it and just figure it's just going to have to be what it is. And I didn't, again, if you would have told me a year before this was going to happen, I would have said, there's no way Ted Templeman was going to do this. A friend of mine said, why don't you just ask him? About 2 months before this. I was like, okay. So I call him up and I say, hey, Ted, would you come to Pasadena? And he's like, well, I've never done anything like that before, but yeah, I like your book. I mean, because he had read an advanced copy of the book. I really like your book. I'll come do that. I'm like, the guy who produced Van Halen is going to come hang out with me and sign books? The guy who produced the Doobie Brothers, Little Feat, Montrose, Sammy Hagar's VOA. Looking at you, Goodspeed. Right? This man, this rock and roll legend is going to come hang out with me? To me, I mean, this was incredible. This was the guy who was in the studio, who went down into the basement with Van Halen night after night when those guys were working on their songs to help them put their songs together, to figure out which songs they were going to record. Came in and did it. And so, you know, to kind of close for you guys tonight, I want to just emphasize, you know, just be willing to take a risk. And I'm not saying take a crazy risk. I'm not saying mortgage your house and sell your children off for cash to start a business. I'm saying take a risk that seems to be something that's out of your comfort zone. Take that little leap of faith and just do it. Because, again, could this have been, all this thing been a big, huge disaster for me? The book could have been a debacle? Maybe. But it would have been, in the end, life would have went on. My wife still would have loved me, I think. She's wearing the Van Halen Rising shirt, by the way, so I think she still loves me. And it would have been all okay. So take a risk. And again, for me too, it was more of a struggle. Years of struggling with this to come to the place where I was like, I'm going to actually do this. A lot more time struggling internally than the years I took struggling to get the book published. And again, the publishers, all the stuff about the guy, the guy in the pink shirt, all that stuff was difficult. But for me to kind of get to the place where I'm going to do this, that was the hardest thing. And then have some fun and get excited. I really, really find if you're enthusiastic and invested, if you're like, I'm doing this because I'm excited about this, if you can get other people excited about it, other people will get on board if they can see you're really engaged and really passionate about what you're doing here. And so I would say just throw yourself out there and see. It might work, it might not, but if it doesn't, it's okay. And that's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much. So, happy to take questions. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer whatever, on any topic you'd like to ask me other than my shirt choice. Yeah.
So you're in Tulsa now?
I am.
How has the university received success?
Great question. I'm no longer working for the university. Now, I know it's going to sound like, I know what we're going to think it's X equals Y or whatever the word is here. What ended up happening to me was my wife got this great job in Tulsa. And so I was actually doing a commute for years. From 2010 to May of 2015, I was driving from Tulsa to Springfield, Missouri, and being gone during the week. And so it all sort of came to a head eventually when we had twins. I don't mean that to sound the way it sounded. It didn't come to a head, but it was sort of, when we had twin babies, it was just, it could not go on any longer, and I resigned the position. that was something that I had to do for my family ultimately, but I do understand that was something that was a very stressful and difficult decision to make. I had tenure, and we were kind of caught between these two things. I have a lot of family in Tulsa. My wife has a great job. We like Tulsa. I've got this job in Springfield. So that's actually when I resigned the position, which, you know, I love being a professor, but it ended up being something that was just not workable. So yeah. So you know, I don't know. That's a good question. Other questions? Someone else had a question, right? Nobody? Yeah.
You said you had problems with Ron and Eddie.
Uh-huh.
You said you talked to Michael.
I did.
His response and what was his? Did he read the book? Did he talk? Was he friendly?
Yeah, so I talked to him back in 2012 or 13. He was really friendly. So the backstory for people who don't know, Michael Anthony is the guy who got pushed out of Van Halen for Eddie's son, Wolfgang, who plays in the band. You know, I didn't ask him anything about the current politics of Van Halen, but he was very happy to talk about the old days. I always tell the story because it's so great, but, you know, I said to him, I said, well, Michael, I said, I know there must have been a lot of friction in the band. He was talking a little bit about the tensions between Roth and Eddie a little bit, but then he said, well, that really wasn't the big issue. It was more between Alex and Eddie. There was more tension. And I said, oh, yeah, what ended up happening? He told me that, well, Alex and Eddie would get into fist fights. They wouldn't just they would argue about a song, and eventually one of them would throw down the guitar, the other one would throw down the drumsticks, and they would basically throw down in the practice space. And he talked about how Alex was bigger and stronger and would inevitably get on top of Eddie and be punching him, but would be very careful not to hurt his hands. So punch him in the chest, you know, punch him in the gut, bruise him up over there, that's fine, but we're not going to hurt Eddie's fingers, because Eddie's fingers make us money. So, you know, he was really cool to talk to, very unaffected by fame from what I could tell, and didn't sound the least bit embittered. And so that was the thing, like you're sort of listening for like well, those guys did this, but you know, at least on the phone with me for that hour and a half or whatever I talked to him, he seemed very much sort of at peace with saying this is the way it is and life will go on. Yes, sir.
When I saw that you didn't interview the brothers or David Roth, my thinking was this book is going to be more accurate.
You're my man. You're my man. Come on up here. You have door prizes, koozies. Get this man a koozie. Yeah, that was the case, and that was the thing I tried to really make the case to some of the publishers to say, look, they have a story, but this is not their story, right? I was trying to tell the book from the story from the perspective of all the people who were around Van Halen, the kids who went to high school with these guys, the guys who helped them haul gear, their roadies, the people around who saw it from the outside. Now, I wanted to talk to those guys, but yeah, you're right. I mean, the thing about authorized biographies is the individual gets to say, we're not talking about that. And to be honest with you, it would have been a very difficult, let's just imagine an alternate universe where David Lee Roth says, yes, but I get to have final say over the manuscript. You know, and then you're like thinking, well, it's money, potentially more money, potentially, depending on what the deal, who knows what the deal would be, the arrangement would be. But even if he didn't want any money, he might just say, if you want me to talk to you, I need to be able to have the final say over what's in the book. That would have been a very difficult decision for me to make, because you're like, it's David Lee Roth. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so that's the thing about it, an authorized biography. Yes, sir? Wouldn't, yeah. You know, no. I never heard one piece of... No, I never heard anything from anybody suggesting I shouldn't write the book. I did hear through the grapevine that Eddie and Alex might one day write their own biography. I have that from a source where I think it's pretty accurate. I don't know if that'll ever happen. That may have just been idle talk, but the story basically being the brothers want to write a book together. So no, but what I always told myself, if that ever ended up happening, did anyone ever read Hammer of the Gods? If you haven't read it, if you like write biographies, it's a great biography. It came out in 1995. A guy named Stephen Davis wrote it, one of my favorites. And so the book comes out. It's a book about Led Zeppelin's history, right up to the 80s. And Jimmy Page, the guitarist from Led Zeppelin, calls it trash or rubbish. He probably called it rubbish. This is utter rubbish. You know, to some magazine, Robert Plant trashed the author. I think it's the biggest selling rock biography of all time. So, I mean, like, honestly, I was like, if those guys want to try, I don't want them to. I'd be very upset if they did. But, I mean, it's not exactly something that would prevent a book from being successful if you have people who are going to be in a position of power to make a splash about it. We don't want this book to come out. I mean, for some people, that's like, I got to read this book now. If they don't want it out, I mean, for me, that was like even better. That when I heard Jimmy Page called it rubbish, I thought there's got to be a lot of true stuff in there he doesn't want me to know. So I wanted to read it. Other questions?
How did they, who told them the name of Van Halen?
Oh, who told them the name of Van Halen? So the story goes that there was a band meeting, and supposedly Roth was the one who decided here's the thing that ended up happening. This is a funny story I'll tell. So the brothers, their first band name, when they had a power trio, their first real band they had was a band called Genesis. They played in and around Pasadena. Again, they're teenagers. They're like 14 years old. They're called Genesis. And there's some flyers you can see on the internet called Genesis. The story goes that Eddie and Alex were in a record store in Pasadena, and they're going through the letters. They're looking, Gentle Giant, Genesis? And they pull out the record, Nursery Crimes record, this record from 1972, and Eddie looks at Alex and says, well, I guess we've got a record out, Alex. And they held it out, and then they changed the band name. And so then it got changed to Mammoth. But what ended up happening, there was a band in Los Angeles that was already working and performing called Mammoth. And so eventually they had to have another band meeting, and they changed the band name to Van Halen. Ross supposedly was the one who suggested it. Anyone else have a question? I'm happy to answer any and all questions. Yeah?
Two-part question.
Okay.
I read the book, and it's awesome. I think the power of the book is the number of interviews, but what were those 2 or 3 interviews that whenever you got that person to talk, you said, that's...
Yeah, for sure, Templeman. For sure. Because Templeman was the guy who was able to... Gene Simmons was the guy who saw the talent of Van Halen and tried to sign Van Halen, get him a record deal. But Templeman was the guy who got them a record deal and saw the talent of Eddie Van Halen and saw what was special about the band. He was able to give me that perspective of what he saw, the strengths and weaknesses. And he was very, if you read the book, he was very honest. One of the things that's, again, tremendous amount of admiration I have for the band, for David Lee Roth particularly. Ted Templeman told me on the record in the book, he said, I loved the band, I loved Eddie Van Halen, I wanted to sign the band, so he gave them a record deal. He goes, but after I got them in the studio and started working with them from some demo recordings, in other words, some first recordings they're going to do, he goes, I was really scared. I'm like, what are you scared about? Well, David Lee Roth couldn't sing. Oh, okay. I'm like, is that on the record? He goes, yeah, it's on the record. I thought Dave couldn't sing very well. All right, and this is a guy who knows about good vocals. Listen to the Doobie Brothers records, listen to Carly Simon. I mean, he knows Little Feat. He knows what good vocals are. And so, wow, I'm like, wow. And so this whole thing ends up happening where he tells me the story on the record that he had an idea that maybe there should be another singer for the Van Halen. Just crossed his mind. He said, I maybe talked with one other person. He said it wasn't ever a plan, wasn't anything going to happen with it, but I was worried because I got this great guitar player, got this really good band with some really good songs, but I don't think the singer's very good. He thought about getting Sammy Hagar to join Van Halen. True. So when Ted Templeman told me that, and again, that had been rumored, but he was like, yeah. He's like, and again, he's like, there was no game. There wasn't like we were like moving towards this. He just thought it crossed my mind. But then he told me, he said, look, but I knew. I said, look, I can work with this guy. I'll figure out what he does well. We'll work around the things he doesn't do well. He writes great lyrics. He's smart. He's funny. He's a great entertainer. This guy should front this band. And they went forward. And God bless Templeman for that. Templeman told me I would have made the biggest mistake in rock history if I had taken apart that band. He said it would have been the biggest mistake in the history of rock and roll. So when I got Templeman to talk, that was huge.
Second part of the question, what was, from a band perspective, obviously that's why you write the book, story. What was the biggest surprise to you whenever you said, that's a surprise I didn't know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the surprise to me was really getting down to the nitty-gritty about the Gene Simmons story. So Gene Simmons at the time, in 1976, he's in a band called Kiss. Kiss is the biggest band in the world, arguably, in 1976. And the whole issue of what Gene Simmons was trying to do with Van Halen, he sees them in a club in Los Angeles. He takes them to New York, and he tries to get them a record deal. And there was all these stories about what Gene's motivations were for doing this. And when I really got down into the brass tacks with this, to really find out that I think Gene really did want to try to sincerely help Van Halen. It wasn't a money grab. It was on all the stories that you sort of heard, maybe rumors weren't necessarily true, and that unlike some individuals who have had the opportunity to control the publishing of bands, so you guys may or may not know that one of the most valuable aspects of a musician's income is the publishing from the songs. And so famously or infamously, John Bon Jovi held on to a band called Skid Row's Publishing. And so when Skid Row sold 2 million records in 1989, John Bon Jovi collected the revenue from their publishing rights for their band. Gene Simmons could have probably done that. Gene Simmons probably could have said to Van Halen, I'm gonna control your publishing. Like, in other words, sign this paper here. These guys probably would have signed anything he put in front of them. We own your publishing now. Think of the millions of dollars. And so for Gene Simmons to basically tear up, and you can read the book. I mean, Gene had his reasons why he did what he did, but to kind of tear up the contract and basically go do whatever you need to do was, I think, a testament to the guy who was who often gets bashed, who maybe doesn't deserve to get bashed as much as he did. So that was a surprise to me. Yes, sir?
One thing that's some of the connections between people in that, like, just for example, George Lynch didn't become a guitar hero until about 84.
Yes.
85. But he was kicking around in the scene.
Yeah, yeah.
In 77.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's something I learned from your book.
Yeah, yeah.
Were there a lot of things like that that you learned?
Yeah, let me talk about that. So one of the things I grew up a guitar player. I never got past the intermediate stage. I was just one of those things. No matter how hard I tried, I just never got very good. But I had the right influences, right? I liked Eddie Van Halen, I liked George Lynch, like Jimmy Page, all these guys. Loved all the great guitar players. And so the scene in Los Angeles in the late 70s was one of these situations where you had a lot of guys who went on to be very successful pro guitar players who were playing in bands who weren't signed, but were playing alongside Van Halen. So I'll give you one example. I interviewed a guy named Rusty Anderson. Rusty Anderson was a band called Eulogy. Rusty Anderson played a lot of gigs with Van Halen and Eulogy. Rusty Anderson now plays guitar for Sir Paul McCartney. So talk about a great gig. He's one of Paul McCartney's guitar players. I interviewed him. George Lynch, another guy, Tommy Gervin, plays guitar for Eddie Money. I could go down the list of these other guys. These very, very guys who are working musicians who are successful, who are around, and they were able to tell me about Eddie, and they basically were like, yeah, Eddie was the man. They all were like basically like, yeah, he was it. I mean, when I heard it from guys like Mark Kendall of Great White, who at the time was a teenager, he wasn't playing, he was like 14 years old, and told me these stories, you realize these are guys who are successful guitar players who have had gold and platinum records, telling you, yeah, I stood in the backyard and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was into Robin Trower, I was into Bad Company, and I see this kid doing this playing that just blew my mind. You know, when I heard it from those guys, I mean, that really helped. I give the story to me a lot of richness and a lot of truth where, you know, I hope gave it some grit to say, look, this is the real deal. These are not like some clowns who were just like, you know, half drunk standing in the backyard. These are guys who came to watch Eddie play because he was so great.
I would have never guessed Chris Holmes introduced Eddie to the guy that taught him to tap.
Yeah, well, yeah, and Eddie's been kind of reticent to talk about that, but yeah, the story about the tapping, yeah, that's another guy. Yeah, that whole story. We'll talk about that maybe afterwards. Yeah.
It kind of dovetailed that with any of your interviews about the early mid-70s period for Van Halen. I'm a Share Bible fan of here. Was there any talk of Randy Rhoads, kind of the rivalry between Randy Rhoads?
Yeah. So yeah, everybody knows, right? Randy Rhoads was a guitar player with a band called Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot never made it in the 70s. Randy Rhoads goes on to play with Ozzy Osbourne and record some of Ozzy's best songs, and it becomes this guitar legend. You know, I think that stuff is, I never heard anybody talk about that. I think that stuff is probably now much more of an internet creation. I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, for all I know, right, obviously I didn't talk to everyone. I don't know every story. Maybe Eddie Van Halen, they had a fist fight someday, you know, someday. No, I didn't know about it or something. But I think a lot of that was more, I mean, Eddie was shy, Randy Rhoads was shy. I highly doubt there was some sort of like, I hate you rivalry. In part because, honestly, by the time Quiet Riot was coming up to actually even start to think about playing some of the better clubs in Los Angeles, Van Halen already had a record deal. So you have a record deal with Warner Brothers, why are you worried about it? I'm not saying he didn't respect him as a guitar player, or didn't, you know, maybe think he was a nice guy, but I don't think that Eddie saw these guys saw him as a threat. You know, it's hard to know, in part because Eddie's become so beloved, how honest people are being about their looking back at those times of what their view of Eddie was. But all those guys told me that, you know, look, Eddie was the man. I mean, he was the guy. He was the best. And I think history's proven that out to be true. I see somebody else with a hand up? Yeah. Yes, sir. It's going to be in my tombstone.
Well, how is writing the book and doing all the research and all the interviews affected you? Are you any more or less of
Yeah. You know, there are things that you learn in the process of writing a book like this that people don't people ask you not to print in the book, and there's stuff I had to leave out of the book for a good reason, that you sort of look at, you know, I mean, it's like anybody's life. If someone was digging into my past, there are things I've done I'm not proud of, and I would not be happy to have published into a book, and those things didn't go into the book. I mean, so it's interesting, you find things out because you find out of so many personal interactions, some things that, you know, make you maybe admire the band members less than you would have before. But, I mean, on the whole, I mean, taking it from the whole, as I said, it's made me a different type of fan because I feel like I have this base of knowledge now that sort of makes like all the mythical things that I thought when I was 15 and 18 and 22 years old kind of are gone. But just again, how hard those guys worked and how really in 1977 and 78, soft rock, disco, and punk rock dominated sort of the pop culture. Punk rock was going to be the next big thing that was going to be the next aggressive music form. Disco was all over the radio. Linda Ronstadt, the Eagles, Fleetwood Mac, the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack sold, was it #1 for almost all of 1978. For Van Halen to be successful in that environment, to me, again, just how long those guys had worked to make it, and then for those guys to break through in that year, to me, just raised my admiration for them. Yeah? Oh yeah, that is him. Yeah, that is him. Yeah, so there's a part in the middle of the song where there's a talking back and forth. Yeah, he told me that they were goofing around, and then they went back and edited that into the song. Yeah, he's full of great stories. I mean, he's an amazing man, and a very modest person, and he was a house producer for Warner Brothers for a lot of years when Warner Brothers was the biggest label in the world. And so, yeah, to be able to talk to the guy who was worked in the studio with them was just a special thing for me. Yeah. So yeah, that was Templeman's voice on there. Yeah.
Does he still talk with the band? How's their relationship?
Yeah. So what would I say about that? Let me be careful what I say there. He hasn't talked to those guys in a long time. There was a falling out that happened somewhere along the way, I think, for reasons that may not be totally clear to Ted what exactly is at the root of all of it, but he hasn't talked to those guys in a long time. I know that he has told me over and over again that Eddie's a nice guy. I like Eddie. You know, in other words, feels, I think, sort of a bit of regret that the relationship has gotten to a place where they don't talk anymore, but has nothing but good thing. He had nothing but positive things to say, especially about the beginning with those guys. And things went sort of south, and you know, they had a long run together. They had 6-8 years together, and that's sort of a situation, I think, with a lot of, it's rare for any one band to work with the same producer for that many albums, and so things have sort of run their course. But he's enormously proud of the work he did together. He told me, you know, working on 1984, how many times they recorded the Lamborghini. So there's that whooshing sound during Panama, like we're running a little bit hot tonight, and there's that whoosh. And he said they spent like 2 days like trying to get the Ferrari and the Lamborghini, Eddie's Ferrari, and then they're backing it up and they're putting the microphones to try to get that whoosh just right. You know, being the producer, and like, you know, they really wanted to work on that part. And working on Hot for Teacher, that David Lee Roth brought in kids' desks into the studio, 5150. They had like basically set it up like a classroom so they could do the breakdown parts with the parts like they're supposed to be kids in school, and how just how creative Dave was and how hard they worked on those songs together. So I think he's, you know, I don't want to speak for him, but I would say he doesn't have any regrets about it. I think he probably regrets that he hasn't talked to him in a long time, those guys. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm happy to sign a book, sign a koozie, whatever, and you can talk to my lovely wife out there. It was nice. Now, thank you guys for coming. This was an awesome event. I'm still thanking you guys. Thank you. It was awesome.